Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this public forum presented by the Weaselhead, Glenmore Park Preservation Society, and Calgary River Valleys. I'm Dave Taylor, your moderator for tonight, the talk show host and recovering politician. Tonight's forum focuses on the impact that the proposed Southwest Ring Road will have on the Weaselhead Natural Area and on the Elbow River. We have several knowledgeable speakers on our panel tonight whom I will introduce in just a moment. First, though, I would like to introduce the MLA for Calgary Glenmore, Linda Johnson. Linda? I'm also told that there are a number of people from City Hall in the audience, but they all want to stay incognito, so I'm not introducing any of them. My job here tonight is to keep things moving. So I'll introduce the panel in just a second, and following their presentations, we will open the floor to your questions. But the point here tonight is to try and have you leave feeling that this was time well spent, that you hopefully have a clearer idea of where things are at, and you have a sense of what you want to do next. Everyone on the panel has valuable information to share with you, but nobody's information is so valuable that they're allowed to encroach on their fellow presenters' allotted time. Within our allotted time tonight, I want to give as many of you as possible the opportunity to participate as well. You'll see that there are microphones set up in both of the aisles here for the question and answer session that will follow the presentation. Therefore, the rules of engagement are as follows. Our panelists will get a total of 30 minutes. I'm allotting up to the first 15 minutes, although they can take less time if they would wish. Feel free to do that. To the people with Alberta Transportation, and then 5 minutes each for our three remaining panelists, and we will then open it up to your questions. I know that some of you feel very passionately about this, but tonight, in fairness to everyone else who wants to turn at the microphone, when we open it up for questions, your passion will have to be brief. I will allow each questioner up to 1 minute for a preamble or a rant or a gentle coercion or whatever you want. Then please ask your question, get to the point. Long speeches will be cut off. You may direct your question to a specific member of the panel if you wish, or you can leave it to me and I will direct a member of the panel to answer you. I may also direct a second member of the panel to answer the same question, but I'm not going to ask or allow every single panel member to weigh in on the same question for every single question. And if the panelists get too long-winded, I'll cut them off too. Again, about the passion. The folks at the Weaselhead Society and Calgary River Valleys have worked hard to assemble a panel that can give you more than just one perspective on this, which means that most likely you will not agree with every one of our presenters. However, even those one disagrees with can provide useful information, so I would ask you please to listen and be courteous. Now, introductions. Representing Alberta Transportation this evening are Gary Lamb, Darren Carter, and Oliver Laser. Gary is going to be the main presenter for Alberta Transportation. He is their construction manager for Calgary. He's the project sponsor for all new provincial highway work within the city limits. He's a civil engineer and he's been involved in projects and project management ranging from Calgary's water treatment plants to the Convention Centre, the West Side Rec Centre, and the Mount Royal University expansion, and now, of course, the design and construction of the Calgary Ring Road. The other two gentlemen representing Alberta Transportation will not be actually presenting to you in the first part of this evening, but they are here once we open it up to questions and answers for you to direct your questions to, or Gary may punt some of your questions for him off to them if he feels that they're more qualified to answer that question than he might be. Darren Carter has worked in environmental management services at Alberta Transportation since 2003. He has worked on the environmental assessments for both the Calgary and Edmonton Ring Roads, as well as numerous other road projects throughout the province. He's an active member of the Transportation Association of Canada's Environment Council, and before coming to Alberta, he worked in the forestry sector in British Columbia. Oliver Laser is a senior project manager and environmental planner with AMEC, or AMEC. How do you pronounce it? AMEC? AMEC in Calgary. With 20 years' experience in environmental impact assessment and environmental protection planning and implementation, soils and reclamation, he managed the environmental studies for the Deerfoot South Extension and other sections of the Ring Road. Oliver is also an active member of the Transportation Association's Environmental Council. Now, Representing the Weaselhead Glenmore Park Preservation Society is Lisa Dalside. Lisa began as a naturalist leader with the Society's education programs 10 years ago and is now executive director of the Society, which is in its 20th year of protecting the integrity and biodiversity of the Weaselhead for future generations to enjoy. Lisa has a BSc in conservation biology and a passion for wildlife and protecting their habitat. Catherine Hull is here from the Alberta Riparian Habitat Management Society. You may know the society better as Cows and Fish. If you didn't, I'm thinking now you will. That is a very catchy name. Catherine has her master's in environmental design with an environmental science focus and worked for several years as a professional biologist for an environmental consulting firm near Calgary before joining Cows and Fish in 2008 as a range and riparian ecology specialist. And our final panelist is Rochelle Haddock, a research associate with the Mistakis Institute. Rochelle has a BSc in Natural Resources Conservation and a master's in Environmental Design, and for the past 4 years has worked on road ecology through her role as communications lead for the Highway Wilding Initiative. Again, ladies and gentlemen on the panel, I will keep you to time, 30 minutes total for our presenters. And audience members, I will open the floor to your questions once you've heard from all the panelists. We will begin with the representative from Alberta Transportation. So Gary, you have up to 15 minutes. As I said, if you don't need 15 minutes, that's okay too.
Thank you very much, Dave, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As Dave mentioned, my name is Gary Lamb. I'm with Alberta Transportation. We can just go to the next slide, which is just a summary of what we're going to be talking about. We've already done the introductions. Hopefully I'll give you a little bit of a project overview about the uncompleted section of the Calgary Ring Road, talk about the realignment of the Elbow River, and some of the environmental assessment work that's been done to date. So the next slide is just a map of the city of Calgary. The orange and blue section here on the left-hand side are the uncompleted sections of the Calgary Ring Road. The other pieces are northwest, northeast, and southeast Stony Trail, which are actually in service. Just an overview on the next slide. The southwest portion, we actually are dividing the uncompleted section of the Ring Road into two pieces, what we call the West Calgary Ring Road project and the southwest. So specifically talking about the southwest project here tonight, this extends from Glenmore Trail just east of 69th Street, south across the Tsuut'ina lands that are being acquired, and then south to Highway 22X, and then along Highway 22X to McLeod Trail. Obviously, there's some of the key components of this are the new Elbow River bridges, which include a 5-lane bridge over in the southbound direction and a 4-lane in the northbound. Replacement of the existing Weaselhead Road Bridge, which serves the members of the Tsuut'ina Nation. River realignment, stormwater management ponds to deal with runoff from the road before it discharges to the Elbow River. And ultimately, there may be 2 additional bridges across the Elbow River if the province proceeds with a second ring road around Calgary. Certainly not anticipated in the 30-year time horizon, but part of the forward thinking that we're trying to do is what happens 30, 40, or 50 years from now as Calgary and Alberta continues to grow. The next slide just shows a map. The area highlighted in yellow really identifies the lands that the road will be built in. The lands that are being acquired from the Tsuut'ina Nation will be incorporated in what's called the Transportation Utility Corridor. These are the lands that are owned by the province of Alberta around Calgary. They're there not just for the construction of the ring road, but also to provide a location for other linear infrastructure. And by that I mean utilities, pipelines and power lines. As we continue to grow as a city and as a society, we continue to use more power, whether that's electrical power or natural gas. The utility companies are trying to service our demands as citizens, and to do that they need to put more infrastructure in place. And some of that will be located on these lands. The next slide just talks a little bit more about that. One of the reasons why the alignment has been arrived at in the negotiations with the Tsuut'ina was their position that this road, which does sever portions of their reserve, had to be as far to the east on the reserve as possible. In the negotiations that were undertaken between the Government of Alberta and the Tsuut'ina Nation, we have arrived at what we believe is the best alignment possible that meets their needs and our needs for a safe alignment that can allow for the construction of a high-speed urban freeway, which is what Stony Trail is. Though I have to say I shouldn't have said that, because it's not going to be called Stony Trail across the Tsuut'ina lands. The name is to be determined. The next slide, the Elbow River realignment. We have, and I've been involved in this project for over 9 years, and we have been talking about the crossing alternatives for the Elbow River since I started working on this project in 2005. It will be a multi-span bridge. Should it span the overall length of the valley? One of the challenges of doing that is a combination of safety-related and cost-related issues. It is approximately 1 kilometer from bank to bank through the area where the Elbow River runs, just on the west edge of the Weaselhead. Bridges are less safe than roads on embankments. They ice up earlier. We also have an interchange at the north end as you come into the river valley. Merging on bridge decks is less safe than merging on embankments. Safety is one of the key issues here. We also believe that the current bridge plans are reasonable to achieve the safety, cost, and environmental objectives. Do we have to realign the river? Yes. One of the other issues the nation brought to the table was they wanted the bridge to be as low as possible. If we were to span from bank to bank, the bridge would have to be at a higher elevation. That makes it more noisy because sound carries from higher objects, more visible, it will be lit, light would go further. These are all issues that we have looked at and tried to address with the current design. The next slide about the realignment. The existing channel of the Elbow River in the area where the road will be built doesn't cross the road alignment, it runs along the road alignment. That doesn't create a safe situation for building a bridge structure. That would allow the bridge to attack the pier foundations. Without realigning the river, we would end up with a bridge that would be more susceptible to damage and failure. By realigning the river, we will create a perpendicular crossing of it, and yes, will we have to armor the banks of the river to keep it in its alignment? Yes, we will. The river will be free to meander both upstream and downstream of the crossing. The Elbow River is an aggressive river. It does like to move, and we can see that in the floods of 2005 and 2013. The next slide shows the concept, and this is the concept. This has not been designed. This is part of what the project will design, but will it look exactly like this? I can't say that. Will we expect the bridge to be some minimum requirements? Yes, we will set those. But we do believe that the channel will be realigned approximately as shown on this drawing here. Excuse me. There will be some, and we can go to the next slide. The realignment will incorporate existing river features. Curves will mimic natural channel curvatures. Some people have taken what's been seen on the video that the animation that Alberta Transportation put together and posted on our website. That is not an accurate representation of what this channel will look like, but it was done to try and give people a better understanding of what the third dimension of the ring road plans would give. We have, on other segments of the ring road, had trouble trying to explain to people what interchanges would look like, what the relative elevation of the road would be to the adjacent development. That animation was developed to try and address those issues. We will end up maintaining a similar cross-sectional area for the river. Fisheries habitat will have to be replaced. This is part of the regulatory approval that we'll have to get from Fisheries and Ocean to realign the river. We'll keep the overall channel length the same, and the reason we do that is so that the velocity of the river doesn't change. If you steepen a channel, velocities go up. If you flatten it, it slows down. We will have to protect our infrastructure from erosion and scour and future floods. Large rock will be placed along the banks. However, there are bioengineering measures that can and will be implemented to help stabilize the banks and also create a more naturalized looking bank over time. What will the river crossing look like? And this has been posted on the Weaselhead's, we'll go to the next slide. It will look something like this. We will specify the minimum size of the openings in the bridge and the elevations to ensure that it has the capacity to pass flood events such as the 2013 flood. For example, how big is an opening of 60 meters across the bottom? And this is 90 meters across the top. This room is less than 30 meters wide. So a 60-meter opening is twice the size of this. So that gives you a scale. And the drawing, the large drawing at the top, does make this look like a small opening. The reality is that it is not a small opening. It's an appropriate sized bridge for a river the size of the Elbow River. The Elbow River in the 2013 flood. The 2007 bridge planning used information from the 1932 flood event in Calgary, which at that point in time was the largest recorded flood in recorded history for the Elbow River. However, the 2013 flood was a larger event. We've had a reevaluation of the bridge openings and the elevation of the bridges. What we do know, and I can't tell you how much water came down the Elbow River, that still is an undetermined point of information. What we do know is what was the elevation of the water, and that's very critical to a bridge planner. He can use that to ensure that the bridge would handle a flood event with freeboard, which means extra capacity based on the 2013 flood. What do we know? We know that the Highway 8 bridge upstream of Calgary on the Elbow River stayed open during the 2013 event. We also know that the existing Weaselhead bridge stayed above the water level in the 2013 event. Those are very good data points and really very useful in helping us to determine what would be an appropriate elevation for the bridge over the river. So what we are going to provide is a bridge that is wider and higher, or wider and a higher waterway opening compared to those two existing bridges. The next slide. So, and this is what I was trying to emphasize, is the 2013 flood event did provide a real-world model, which helps us in our bridge design criteria. What will happen in the future, what has happened in the past, the floodplain both upstream and downstream of this road crossing will continue to flood in large storm events. This is a photo of the area where the bridge will be constructed, taken at the time of the 2013 flood. There's a lot of water down there, but there is water mostly flowing in the river channel, and that's what we will accomplish by realigning the river and crossing it with a bridge of an appropriate size. Other issues that have been raised, what will the Elbow River, the embankment and bridge have on the aquifer? The static force of the weight of the fills on the alluvial materials is not expected to alternate. Is not expected to alter the permeability and alluvial materials. I have actually talked to the geotechnical consultants who did the investigation for us in 2006 and 2007 and asked that question specifically. These are professionals and this is their job, and I trust the information they provide me. Groundwater elevations tend to be consistent across the floodplain, regardless of the lateral location of the river channel. This is an alluvial floodplain. Water moves sideways, it'll move up and downstream. It doesn't move upstream, it moves downstream. This is a comment about the vegetation in the valley does not actually primarily rely on the aquifer, but it is a source of moisture, but also we have precipitation runoff and seasonal flooding. Stormwater management facilities will be provided for this project. We will meet the requirements of Alberta Environment and Sustainable Resources regarding the total suspended solid guidelines for discharge to the Elbow River. The storm ponds will be designed to properly accommodate 24-hour events, the 1 in 100 year storm event. We'll also have spill containment facilities on these, so if there is an accident and liquid product gets spilled on the roadway, it can be captured in the stormwater management ponds. We actually did a risk assessment for this road as part of the functional planning study, and the risk of an accident happening and a tanker spill on this road is very low. Ponds manage the peak flows from intense rainfalls. The idea behind that is so that the post-development discharge rate is not higher than the pre-development, which keeps scour from occurring and keeps sediment issues from being developed. Environmental assessment work. There is an environmental assessment study that was done for the 2006 functional planning study. It's being updated because there are some different areas involved, including the portion of the Weaselhead Park that's been included in the lands to be acquired. We're actually looking at as if the full lands that are being acquired are going to be disturbed, which is overly conservative. I don't think all the lands will be, but that will actually make sure that our impacts are not exceeded. We are doing some supplemental field work, as I mentioned. And one of the environmental assessment work is being done as part to support the federal land transfer as part of the transfer of the Tsuut'ina lands to the government of Alberta. Wetlands are impacted by this project. We have mapped them. We've classified their wetland types, their boundaries, and the types have been confirmed in the field. During the design and construction phase of the project, the contractor or the designers have to obtain a Water Act approval if they are going to impact wetlands. At that time, working with Alberta Environment Sustainable Resources, they develop their mitigation plans at that point in time. We have, under fisheries, habitat assessments have been completed and updated to capture the 2013 changes. Information will support Fisheries Act authorizations, applications by the contractor, again, as required by Department of Fisheries and Oceans. Wildlife considerations. We have spent a considerable amount of time, and my colleagues here can answer specific questions on that regarding field surveys and installation of wildlife cameras to capture information about existing wildlife in the Weaselhead area. There are obviously coyotes, foxes, deer that are in the area. Other species do come in on an individual basis occasionally. The bridge openings are designed to allow for movement of these species and are not designed to impede or discourage their use. We see a lot of animal movement in river valleys, and we will allow and try and design accordingly to provide for them. Mitigation measures that are included on each side of the channel. During normal flows, there are approximately 15-meter wide pathways for wildlife passage. In addition, at the high water levels, there's another 2.5-meter wide passageway, which in a flood event would still allow wildlife movement under the bridges. We will look at how to soften the armoring in that area through the use of topsoils and native shrub species. There are no recreational paths underneath these bridges. There is no pathway system going into the Tsuut'ina lands. That's part of the agreement with the nation. Other considerations, shrub plantings in the areas between the bridges to provide nesting, resting areas for birds. Another issue that has been brought up is concerns around road salt. Salt is used on roads. That is a safety-related issue. The roads have to be safe to use. Salt spray and drift is a concern for vegetation adjacent to roadways like this. We have actually had AMEC do some work for us. They've submitted a draft report. Obviously, the contractor will have to follow the Environment Canada's Code of Practice for the environmental management of road salts. We will do some additional work on the issues around road salt and spray of road salt and determine whether there are mitigation measures that can be implemented and what those measures might be prior to contracting for this work. Lighting issues. There are concerns about light spillage from the roadway. There's a very interesting display here tonight about that issue. I think we are seeing a change in the standards used for lights, and we're taking that into consideration for this project. Noise is a large issue, I understand. One of the challenges is under our current policies, we provide noise mitigation for residential areas, not for park areas. That is the current Government of Alberta guideline. Prevention of spread of invasive species, which is another issue that we see at the table here tonight, is certainly an important issue with respect to the Weaselhead Preservation Society. We will work with them on what measures we can implement during the construction to minimize the potential for that occurring. So in essence, we are trying to find ways to work with the organizations that have brought their concerns forward. I'm here tonight to hear other issues that may be brought up, and I'm willing to talk to you about them. Thanks very much.
All right, our next three presenters have 5 minutes each. We'll begin with Lisa Dalside from the Weaselhead Society.
Thank you everybody for coming. The Southwest Ring Road will complete the Calgary Ring Road system and will ultimately act as the Trans-Canada bypass. It is tucked in close to the Weaselhead so that the Tsuut'ina do not have a major road bisecting their land. Most discussion to date has been about traffic issues. Once the ring road is approved, the community of Providence gets the go-ahead to start development, and I've heard an estimated 80,000 vehicles will be added to Glenmore and Crowchild traffic as a result of this section of the ring road. This is not a commuter solution, but we're not here to discuss that. We are here to talk about the crossing over the Elbow River Valley, South Calgary's drinking water source. The Elbow River Aquifer and Weaselhead wetlands are used to store spring runoff, reduce floods, and re-release water into the reservoir over the summer, fall, and winter. We have been concerned since 2005 with this cut-and-fill design. It is a cut-and-fill berm across the valley with a short span bridge, and this is going to be the only wildlife corridor in and out. The ring road will run along the heart of the Weaselhead wetlands. The southwest corner of the park was sold for the road. Wetlands filter sediment and toxins. Road contaminants will impact wetland health and their ability to provide the ecological service of maintaining our drinking water quality. To enable the berm design, the river will be rerouted and heavily armored to prevent erosion of the upstream side of the berm. The orange triangle is for reference in the next picture. Wetlands will be filled in. Note those wetlands and how they're being lost. Note the rerouting and channelized rivers, stormwater ponds, and the armoring of the Elbow River. What does a berm with an eventual 16-lane highway mean for the Weaselhead natural area? There's lots of cumulative impacts, altering ecosystems, biodiversity, water quality, fish habitat, channel migration, riparian areas, flood passage, forest rejuvenation, and thus increasing risk of forest fire, noise and light pollution, invasive weeds, sediment load. The list goes on. It affects our recreational use and our experience that students have as their outdoor classroom. But what about when it floods? This picture was taken 6 days after the 2013 flood. Note the silt layer across the valley. The river used the whole valley floor during that flood, which reduced flood peak, slowing down the speed of the water, storing water for re-release over the summer, and reducing sediment load in the reservoir. This is why the Weaselhead natural area has the highest level of protection in the city of Calgary. The 2005 design was for 700 cubic meters per second. The peak flow in 2013 was about 1,240 cubic meters per second. The Glenmore Reservoir was drawn down in anticipation of a spring flood. The probable maximum flood is 2,550 cubic meters per second. Structures in Canada can be built in two ways that if they're going to act like a dam, so that they won't fail in a catastrophic flood, i.e. to build to the probable maximum flood, or so that if and when they do fail, they do not cause loss of life. This berm may act as a dam in times of extreme flooding. How will this affect Tsuut'ina residents, people living in Discovery Ridge? And what about a predicted surge wave when and if overtopping occurs? All of these flood issues are a big concern to us, but the geotechnical concerns have us alarmed as well. The test wells show permeable and compressible alluvial and lacustrine sediments, and we have a concern regarding compressible soils under high fills, and it's recognized in the reports. These clays and silts are notorious in Calgary for their plasticity. Why continue with the cut and fill design? Because it is the least expensive. But is it really? What about long-term continual repairs due to long-term settling? Has the cost analysis been done against that idea of an open span bridge concept? Current plans are based on a functional, conceptual, and screening studies done 9 years ago. We feel there is room for improvement. Recent Government of Alberta reports state that building in the floodplain structures should be built to allow for flooding and lateral channel migration to occur. Is this what we want our rivers to look like? We can do better. It was done in Bowness Park with Stony Trail. An open span bridge would allow for the natural river migration, flooding, and for a wildlife corridor. The current 37th Street Bridge up is also another example. And all of the work that the city and the community groups did to create that wildlife corridor will be wasted with the current ring road plant design. Our next step is to host workshops to come up with some alternatives. Alberta is a proud province, presented with an opportunity to construct the best road possible with enhanced environmental mitigation that will respect the integrity of the Elbow River Valley. But to upgrade the current cheapest option, Alberta government needs public pressure to encourage them to do better, because great cities deserve great parks.
Thank you, Lisa. And now I'll call on Catherine Hull from Cows and Fish.
Again, good evening, and thank you very much, everyone, for being here tonight. Again, my name is Catherine Hull, and I'm here today representing the Alberta Riparian Habitat Management Society. I'm here to reiterate why we need to pay close attention to how we impact our riparian areas and our land use decisions. While many of you may not have heard the term riparian before, for anyone that has visited and spent time in Weaselhead Park, whether you know it or not, you're intimately acquainted with these special areas. Riparian areas encompass floodplain and shoreline habitats along our streams, rivers, lakes, and wetlands, forming the transition zone between our aquatic and upland environments. These areas act as natural filters that help to purify our water through absorption of nutrients and also by capturing and storing sediment from runoff. Healthy, well-vegetated riparian areas help to resist and slow down accelerated erosion and loss of land by way of natural root mass protection. These areas are also tremendously important for water storage and aquifer recharge. The importance of intact, undeveloped riparian areas for water storage is at no time more obvious than during a major flood. Rushing torrents of floodwater have to go somewhere. And in this regard, you can think of a floodplain as nature's safety valve or insurance policy, specially designed and adapted to store excess water that spills out from the river channel. Where we straighten and channelize our rivers in an attempt to constrict floodwaters to the channel, this can have a race car effect, compounding negative erosive impacts downstream. So the double purpose of a floodplain is a safety valve not only for water storage, but also for dispersing floodwater energy. In natural areas, flooding is a natural process of renewal and can be not destruction. Resilient and dynamic riparian ecosystems are hotspots of biodiversity, particularly within our built, otherwise hostile urban environments. These areas attract all kinds of wild creatures. When we attempt to put an economic value to these goods and services, the price tag quickly exceeds hundreds of millions of dollars annually. Unfortunately, such values have consistently been overlooked by how we continue to develop our landscapes. Continued loss and degradation of our riparian habitat poses not only greater flood risks, but also impacts all of us in terms of degraded fish and wildlife habitat, degraded water quality, and accelerated rates of bank erosion. As Lisa mentioned, we now have provincial planning documents that clearly call for and support higher levels of riparian area protection. The City of Calgary is itself now asserting itself as a leader in this arena with the release of its newly developed riparian strategy, which calls for an integrated and concerted effort to protect and better protect and manage and restore riparian areas. We know that some of the best remaining healthy interconnected corridors of riparian habitat in Calgary occur upstream of the Glenmore Reservoir on the Elbow River. Now, one of the important features to consider in terms of the Elbow River is that it is underlain by porous gravels and cobbles throughout its floodplain. This means that what we do in the floodplain can directly impact surface water quality. So for this important reason, we need to seriously get away from development decisions that see the river as a thin blue static line on a map. We need to see it instead as a dynamic and hydraulically interconnected system. We also need to make decisions that reflect the fact that meandering streams and rivers like Fish Creek and the Elbow River are not static. These are systems that do shift over time within a wide floodplain through ongoing processes of erosion and deposition. In 2009, as an example, the Elbow River forged a new channel here in the Weaselhead, redirecting its main flow through this new channel that you can see on the slide. When we treat our rivers and streams as static entities and we do not give them room to maneuver, this gets us into all kinds of trouble, as we can see here in Barrag Creek, and again here in what was once called the Allen Bill Pond, but what I see now is simply called Allen Bill. Here, despite reinforced riprap and berms after the 2005 flood, the river broke through once again to reclaim its original territory during the 2013 flood. The 2013 flood most certainly left its mark on all of us. But it is not the first flood by any means that Calgarians have seen or are likely to see in the future. Most of us have long since forgotten the disastrous 1929 flood, let alone major flood events that came before that in 1870, 1897, 1902, 1915, and 1923. While we have enjoyed a period of relative stability since the 1930s, we know that successive floods in the 1970s surpassed the 2013 flood on the Bow River. Extreme weather events are only expected to become more frequent and more severe under climate change scenarios. So are we prepared for what is to come? Respecting our rivers by improving bridge designs and giving them more room to maneuver only makes sense now and into the future. So yes, let's hope that whatever decisions we arrive upon today and with the planning of the ring road, that we do manage to protect what is important to all of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. And our final presenter is Rochelle Haddock from the Mistakis Institute.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present as part of this panel. The Mistakis Institute was asked to present tonight to provide a high-level overview of road ecology and considerations that need to be made in order to build or expand highways with both wildlife and people in mind. During my brief talk, I'll provide an overview of the challenges presented by highways and wildlife, outline some solutions that exist to address this problem, discuss the cost-effectiveness of these solutions, and share some research findings that are particularly relevant to the Weaselhead area. The following slides provide a broad overview of highways and wildlife. So starting off, this is the Coles Notes version of road ecology. All wildlife need to be able to move freely throughout their habitat to access water, food, and mates. When highways are built through wildlife habitat, wildlife must find ways to cross over roadways. Sometimes vehicles collide with crossing wildlife. These collisions are unsafe and very costly to society, highlighting that the highways and wildlife problem also poses a risk to human safety. When highways are built or expanded, this fragments wildlife habitat and increases the risk of wildlife vehicle collisions. This is what could take place in the Weaselhead should the ring road be built without concessions to provide safe passage for both wildlife and people. However, solutions exist to keep the landscape connected and reduce potential for wildlife vehicle collisions. So what is the solution? Solutions for this sort of problem are called highway mitigation for wildlife, and they involve the construction of wildlife bridges or overpasses. We've got wildlife underpasses or tunnels and fencing to keep wildlife off the highway right-of-way. These types of mitigations have been used all over the world and are used to realize the safe passage of both wildlife and people. So again, talking about if these crossing structures actually work. Through 16 years of research and monitoring in Banff National Park, highway mitigation for wildlife has been shown to reduce wildlife vehicle collisions by 95% for deer, elk, and moose species. Research in other regions has confirmed the success of these solutions, and subsequent to learning that these crossing structures work, Most people will ask, is this an affordable solution to deal with highways and wildlife? And the answer is yes. Researchers have considered the cost of damage to vehicles, highway cleanup, human injury and death, and lost hunting revenue by species when considering this challenge. Using very conservative numbers, they've concluded that the cost to society of hitting a deer is around $6,600. The cost to hit an elk is around $17,000, and a moose is over $30,000. Research completed by the Western Transportation Institute concluded that building a wildlife underpass with fencing can actually save society money once you pass the critical threshold of 3.2 deer collisions per kilometer, and you'll see that, I believe it's in the yellow. Right, the second bar in is the deer threshold there. So effectively, if you have over 3 deer collisions per kilometer on a stretch of highway, building an underpass with fencing can actually save society money. Most people are surprised to learn this. So looking at deer wildlife vehicle collision hotspots in the city of Calgary, this map shows the density of wildlife vehicle collisions based on a 10-year data set. The darker red circles, which you see on the map, depict hotspots in Calgary, where collisions with deer are more common. This analysis was developed by Emily Zink, who is a graduate student at the Yale School of Forestry. She completed this research in partnership with Mistakis and the City of Calgary. The data she used was provided by the City of Calgary 311 data set, where reports are called in by citizens like yourselves. This map shows us there are deer vehicle collisions occurring within the city limits. Over the last 9 years, there has been, on average, 465 deer killed on roads within the city limits. And you can see Glenmore reservoirs right there. I think you can pick it out on the other map as well. So moving on to the last bit of research I wanted to share with you, I want to share some recent research findings on terrestrial ecological connectivity completed by Dr. Michael Quinn and Dr. Mary Ellen Tyler for the Calgary Regional Partnership. This map depicts their study area, and you can see Glenmore Reservoir in the white circle, and you can also see Sarcee Trail depicted. This map depicts areas that are important for ecological connectivity and attractive to wildlife for their movements. Connectivity was mapped based on 3 factors, and those in green are most favorable to wildlife passage, while red, while red represents the least favorable. And again, you can see Glenmore Reservoir circled in white on the map. And finally, Finally, this map depicts the results of a network analysis. The routes shown in darker green convey the routes most passable to wildlife. You can see that one of the routes most passable to wildlife runs through the Weaselhead and continues south. In that area, so that brings my presentation to a close. Thank you for your time. If you wish to learn more about road ecology, you can watch the highway welding film, which you can find at the URL at the top of the slides there. Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you to all our panelists tonight. I appreciate your complete and yet reasonably brief presentations. I appreciate your patience. We have a full house here tonight, standing room only, and I'm sure you have lots of questions. So it is now your turn.